ultimately, with the leadership that Company C had, I just feel like success was impossible. We always see these Hulu and Netflix docuseries about these wild pharmaceutical, biotech, and medical device companies, and rightfully so.
People all across this great nation are in pain, and we have the cure. This new miracle drug.
Oxycodone.
Oxy what?
But I do think there's value in sharing stories about smaller lifestyle companies. Because if we don't call out these kind of companies, it's just going to continue to happen, and then they snowball into those massive companies like Purdue Pharma. I think working as many years as I have has made it a lot easier for me to detect what a lifestyle company looks like, and I generally stay away from them. I stay away from companies that don't focus on the research, that don't focus on the data, that don't focus on the facts. I stay away from companies that try and prolong the life of the company just to maintain their lifestyle and their salaries. I really do think that that is the nucleus of how we get to a Purdue or a Theranos. You start with the love of the lifestyle, and then it snowballs into utter chaos. And you know, the leaders within these kind of companies are truly blinded from reality. That's why I don't like working for companies that have CEOs that don't have some sort of science background, because it's a lot easier for them to get blinded by the money than it is for a scientist, I think. They just refuse to believe when it's time to give up and let go. Not every single asset out there, not every single platform or program is a winner. They don't know how to separate themselves from the success or lack thereof of their device or their drug. I truly believe that 99% of people who start out working in biotech and biopharma, they have altruistic ambitions, but some of them just get lost along the way. And what's even crazier to me is there are so many lifestyle companies that come and go, and the average person has no idea. Most people don't even know. And it's so easy because I feel like the bad people in the industry just harp on the fact that clinical research is a really risky financial investment. And shareholders who invest in clinical research, they're willing to accept the risk in the hopes of developing that blockbuster drug. Why not invest 5, 6, 7 figures for the opportunity of possibly making millions or even billions of dollars? As a clinical research professional, I know it's realistic depending on the stage of development the program is in, depending on the character of who's in charge. And lastly, the science behind the device or the drug itself. But the average investor, they may not know. So the company or the leaders within the company can string investors along and hide behind the guise of high risk, high reward. I don't think it's a good thing. I don't think it's a good thing at all. I think it's absolutely horrible. But for the people who do it, for the life they love to lead and the lifestyle, it's clever, horrible. Absolutely horrible. And you know, an investor is never going to know exactly what's happening within a biotech or biopharma company unless they're actually inside doing the work. They're never going to know. You don't read a press release and really know what's going on inside a company. And of course, I'm talking about minor shareholders, because people who sit on the board, they may have major stakes in the company. So they may know a little bit more than a minor shareholder. But even then, I emailed the board of directors to tell them about what was going on inside the company. Maybe they did know. They probably did know. But because I sent that email, they were forced to take action. I just feel like unless you're actually doing the work every single day, it's really hard for an investor to know exactly what's happening inside the company and why certain things aren't moving along, or why certain program developments are being stalled, or why a company is choosing to rebrand every 5 seconds. Even from 10Qs and 8Ks, I really feel like you get a lot of vague information about what's going on within the company. Rarely is the pinpointed exact issue going to be shared in an 8K or 10Q. You have to be able to read between the lines. I mean, it's exactly why when government agencies are trying to go after a corporation, they always say they need someone from the inside, they need a whistleblower, because you need somebody from the inside to know exactly what is going on. Do I personally think that Company C, the company that I work for, would have snowballed into a company of chaos like Theranos or a Purdue Pharma? You know, I don't think so. They were only going to get so far. A big part of Purdue Pharma being able to get as far as they did was because they had somebody on the FDA pushing their program along. The FDA doesn't operate that way anymore at all. Just taking into consideration that Company C had a study already put on clinical hold, FDA wasn't going to let anything just fly. So I don't think there was any chance of that happening. If anything, after the study started and was actually generating data, FDA could have initiated an investigation on that principal investigator and their site if there were an abnormal amount of safety events or an abnormal amount of protocol deviation. And honestly, if the FDA believed that that site had skewed the data for the better to have a higher positive outcome, then they may have asked the sponsor, Company C, to remove that site and patients from that site from the database and conduct an additional analysis to see what the outcome would have been without that investigator and that site and those patients being a part of the data set. In addition to that, I'm sure there would have been a lot of other consequences if there were a bunch of abnormal safety events or a bunch of abnormal protocol deviations, I'm sure. Ultimately, with the leadership that Company C had, I just feel like success was impossible. And it's really unfortunate because with one of the programs that they had, if it had worked and ended up being successful and was properly managed, it would have been really great for the veteran community. It would have helped a lot of patients. I think Company C kept their doors open for as long as they possibly could, but ultimately the bridge of clinical operations just came crumbling down. So now the process of liquidation and dissolution begins. After a merger, additional income, and all sorts of support, they couldn't get out of phase 1 clinical operations. And that is a red flag. Learn from me. They went from dermatology to orthopedics to infectious disease in the span of a few years. And when I recently checked their website, I saw that it said immunology redefined. That's a red flag. It's been over 2 years since I worked for Company C, a little over 2 years actually. The contract job I was working right after I left Company C ended up converting me to a full-time employee after a few months. After that, I took a break from working. I traveled, I healed from my jaw surgery, and when I was ready, I went back into the workforce, working for myself as a principal regulatory affairs consultant. I'm on contract right now, working full-time. I genuinely love my job and the client that I work for. I have been offered full-time employment. Everyone thinks I'm a contractor because I couldn't find a full-time employee job with benefits and stock options. I don't want it. I'm honestly very happy. For me to consider taking a full-time opportunity, I think it would have to be in the VC setting. I feel like if I worked for a venture capital firm as a regulatory affairs, whatever title you want to give me, and I was sourced to different biotech and biopharma companies within the VC's pipeline, I wouldn't have as much issue implementing regulatory strategy because it doesn't matter what the CEO says. If the VC is saying, we have a regulatory person who's telling you to do this, you have to do it because that's the person who's funding the company. So that's the only way I'd probably take a full-time regulatory offer. I am totally fine being an independent consultant otherwise. You know, I learned a lot from Company C. I learned a lot from that entire journey and from the past few years. I think the number one thing I learned is to do my own benefit risk assessment of whatever company I'm interviewing for that doesn't already have an approved NDA, 510K, PMA, BLA, just any approved application that's generating money for the company. I think for Company C, I should have read their 8Ks, their 10Qs, or anything else that they filed with the SEC. And I also should have looked a little bit closer into the professional backgrounds of the people I was going to be working with. For sure, I can guarantee that I will never allow for myself to be in awe of somebody that I would be reporting to, because at the end of the day, they're human too. My SVP didn't see all the red flags that I saw either. I mean, they ended up taking the job, working there, only for them to get kicked out the door. So I definitely have a clearer perception working in this industry and understanding that I need to look through the glass, really pay attention and assess the company that you're going to be working for. And it's not like I didn't research Company C. I really did. I was just doing it, already trying to believe what I wanted to believe. I just wanted to work for that SVP, so the rest of it didn't matter. I was focused on the leader and nothing else. I think ultimately Company C just had the wrong people in the driver's seat. And you know, that's the reality for a lot of businesses. The product could be great or mediocre, we'll never know, because you have certain people in the company acting as a barrier for forward momentum. Another thing that I did notice at Company C is that there were a lot of people within the company that wanted to speak out against the company doing something wrong, but they were genuinely afraid because of certain people that had the ear of executives. And also within corporate America, there's this horrible narrative that if you speak out against your superior, You're difficult. You're the troublemaker. Why did we hire you? You don't want to ever ruffle feathers because you don't know if the outcome could be you losing your job and your income, of course, as well, or even tarnishing your name within the industry. People should not feel that way when it comes to speaking out against wrongdoing. I definitely feel like it's a form of gaslighting. Like, I just don't understand why somebody would be labeled as a troublemaker for speaking out against a company doing the wrong thing. Crazy. Was I afraid to send that email to the board of directors? Yes. Am I afraid to talk about my experience now? No. Do I think talking about this experience will hurt my chances of getting employed? I mean, I don't really think so, but if a company doesn't want to hire me because I left a company for doing the wrong thing and possibly jeopardizing patients in the public, I don't want to work for you anyway. I and other clinical professionals should not feel bad about wanting to ensure safety and compliance at every single checkpoint of the research and development process. And also, I just think it's bad business to not want to do things the right way the first time. I think that's a fundamental bad business practice. Because at the end of the day, when the health authority is looking through your application and they see all the unsavory things in your application, they're going to call it out. So you may as well have an employee that's working for you that's going to call it out now before you get to the approval process, and they call it out then. You didn't do your study well and had a bunch of protocol deviations or had a bunch of abnormal safety events. Guess what? FDA, EMA, whatever health authority you're pursuing your application in, they're going to call it out. They're going to say your study wasn't adequate and well-controlled. And guess what? You need adequate and well-controlled studies for approvability. Do you know how much it costs to run a study? Millions of dollars. And I'm not talking $2 million. I'm talking 10, 20, 30 million dollars. And that sometimes is just for like one phase 2 study. It really all just depends on the stage of development, but it costs millions of dollars to get a drug approved. You have to think of everything, every activity that you do as a pharma and biotech company in the context of approvability. Every decision you make should be in the context of approvability. And so many companies and leaders within these companies, they forget that. A lot of leaders within these companies, they only think of a program in the context of 2 or 3 years because that's how much runway they have or how much money they have before they have to go out and get more investment dollars. But that's honestly not how they should be thinking. They should be thinking in the context of the 2-3 years because you have to consider the capital you have on hand or the cash you have on hand. But you still should be thinking of your program or your asset in the context of the 5, 10, 15 years it takes to get the product on the market. You have to think end to end. That's why regulatory strategy is even a thing. If you're going to try and make all these quick and dirty choices, it's only going to hurt you in the long run and you may not get approved. So the FDA has this framework that they use, a benefit risk framework, to assess the benefits and the risk of whatever program you're seeking approval for. And when they think about the benefits, they think about how it's going to help the patients. And when they think about the risk, they think about how it could be bad for the community or the general public. I think working in clinical research, professionals should use the same framework when assessing companies. I think the benefit of working in clinical research is being a voice for the populations that you serve. And the risk is possibly shaking up your career, your income, your reputation within the industry by going against people or corporations who may or may not be doing the right thing. And I'm almost certain that there are professionals out there with crazier stories than me. I always say that clinical operations has it the worst and regulatory is always to blame. If regulatory is ever involved, because no one likes involving regulatory, I would need more than these 2 hands to count the amount of companies I've seen with VPs in every single department, but no VP in regulatory. Trust me when I tell you that's not an accident. You don't need a VP of marketing for a phase 2 program with no approved products when you don't even have a VP of regulatory affairs or quality assurance. Just saying. I can breathe a lot easier now. I contemplated and honestly waited a while before thinking about sharing this experience. And I honestly hope that my experience encourages other professionals to speak up or speak out against anyone. It doesn't matter if it's the CEO, speak out against anyone you see doing wrong within the clinical research field. I don't regret a single thing that I did. I don't regret